I'm Emily Gagne from Dread Central, and I'm here with Avery Plewes, the costume designer of Scream 6. Thank you for joining me, Avery.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I want to start our conversation off with a big question, which is, what is your relationship to the Scream franchise out of working in the Scream franchise? Like, when did you see Scream the first time?
Oh gosh. It's funny. I wasn't actually a horror fan until I started working with radio silence. I'm someone who gets scared really easily. Like I actually remember watching the Scream previews as a kid and running out of our living room like terrified. Like I'm from Toronto and streetcars here, like the trolleys, if they go by and they make a sound, I jump. So like jump scares are not were not a thing for me growing up. And then when I started weirdly working in horror and kind of understanding the genre more and how it is, I feel like there's sort of a, a misconception of horror that it's, just camp and kind of, it doesn't have the respect it should in the film industry. And I think I sort of got a better understanding of sort of the importance of it once I started working with radio silence and how cinematic it can be. So I think only a couple of years ago did I watch them all, but I was familiar and a fan, and I think also Scream gets pigeonholed as horror, but I think it's like really good classic cinema as well.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah.
I agree. So do you have a favorite costume from the previous Scream movies?
I love Gale's all of Gale's costumes. Huge Gale fan. I would say the green Versace suit of hers from one is probably my standout favorite.
It's a classic.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Like a horse and carriage when you think of like Scream costumes. And I think Gale is what a lot of, I mean, obviously Ghostface, but I think Gale is what you think of when you think of Scream and costumes.
I agree. I agree. I was gonna ask you how it was taking on that like mantle of styling this like fashion icon in
Yeah.
cinema because she has this legacy and I feel like in every film she kind of changes a little bit. Like she plays with her style. Like in two, for example, she's got the streaks in her hair and she's a little more serious with the white and black. But then in the other film, she's a little more playful with color. So yeah, how was it recreating her style for this film and
Yeah.
working with Courtney?
Well, I kind of approached it as, I mean, Courtney's the expert on Gale, right? Like she's been doing Gale for over 20 years. So, um, I was very invested in, you know, in how she felt, her thoughts, emotions. Also, it's Courteney Cox, so she knows she's been acting also for over 25 years. So she knows her body, she knows what looks good on her. Um she knows Gale. So I really leaned into sort of how she felt about Gale. To her, bright color equals Gale. And I just when I do any project, I really love the research component to developing the characters and like telling the story and backstory. And I have obviously a very vivid imagination, and so with any character I sort of create, or rather, Gale I wasn't creating, I was continuing her legacy. I went back through all of the research of the previous films and sort of looked at what the through line was. And her reporting suit to me was the most important costume, even though it's only in one scene, just because to me Gale's legacy is always her sort of reporting looks. And so when I was doing all of my research, I really started thinking about, okay, Gale, she's in New York, where would she shop, what would she be into? And sort of the consistent thing I kept on thinking of was this designer, Christopher John Rogers,
Yes.
who does really beautiful, bright, vivid, interesting, cool. I mean, I'm a fan of his stuff outside of what we did, but anyways, I emailed his business partner David, who I'd been in touch with previously for a different project that I wanted them to do something for, and they didn't have the time on that one, but I emailed them and I was like, hey, I'm doing the new Scream installment. Are you interested? I think Christopher John Rogers could be really cool as a New York designer for Gale. Also, it's the stuff that he does is so like Gale core in a lot of ways. And when I was looking at her past stuff, it really struck a chord as like she could wear it, and they were totally into it in game. And so her suit's custom. They sent us swatches. Courtney picked the color because there were a couple, and she's like, oh, I've never worn this blue before. Like, let's do this, because Gale, I don't think she's ever worn the same color twice. Like, you know, she has like elements of red, or like she has little sort of elements of color, but she's never worn the exact same color twice. So that was cool. And then we flew one of the suits down to her. I have a tailor I work with in LA, so we did a zoot because of COVID and everything. I couldn't go in the beginning, so we sent the suit and a tailor to her house, and we zoomed with her, myself, and David, and I think Alex, who works at Christopher John Rogers, and we hashed out the fit and how she felt in it. And then they turned it around really quickly. And then I went down to Los Angeles and fit her at her home with the actual suit and other options. And then her other looks, again, I wanted it to feel sort of in the same color world. Like if you lined up all of her looks together, they would weirdly work. And so, yeah, that's sort of, that was the origin story of her hero suit. And then her other looks, you know, she had her sort of athletic look.
Yeah.
And that was really, you know, we started, when you do action and you have, you know, stab wounds and whatnot, you're limited to what you can do. Like she needed long sleeves to protect her elbows, her knees. She needed like full leg coverage. So that was sort of limiting in that regard. And then we landed on that sort of quarter zip. The color is beautiful on her. And then her other look, we wanted it to feel from the waist up when Sam sees her to be like, oh, not you again, like in a blazer. So that it could look as though she's like on the beat coming to report, and then waist down she's in jeans, because then she in the movie says, no, I'm actually here for XYZ. So that's sort of where that came from with her. And that's Victoria Beckham and Dolce & Gabbana on top.
Nice.
Yeah.
I loved the like sheer sort of top she was wearing.
Yeah.
I was like, this is Gail's day off, kind of.
I know, right? And then she has like a bright colored bra underneath, which was Courtney's idea. She really knows what looks good on her, how to dress herself. And you know, you have a giant rack always, and she kind of beelined in on certain items and was like, this is great, this is like, love this. So kind of the easiest fitting in a lot of ways, because she really knows what looks good on her and what she likes and what she doesn't like. So
yeah,
it's great. It was a total dream come true. Like she's an icon.
She is.
Yeah.
And Gail's an icon too. But you got
both. Yeah. It's like icon on icon.
Yeah.
She's so modest too. So I was like, I'm amongst Scream royalty right now. And she's just like, she's very down to earth. So
I love to hear that. Another Scream person of Scream royalty is Kirby, who returns for this.
Yeah.
sequel. And I'm kind of wondering how you conceptualized adult Kirby, because the last time we saw her, she was a teen, and she's
Yeah.
also so iconic. People love her so much, and like think of her a certain way, but you have to bring her into the present.
Yeah. Well, again, it was someone who already had a relationship with the character. So Hayden had like lots of ideas and um definitely all shades of black and grays and sort of darker colors. And a bit of a Hayden described Kirby in the last one as sort of edgy, and so we wanted to sort of maintain that character and what she would look like now. And Hayden really wanted to wear like a classic motorcycle perfecto jacket, which is where that came from. And we added shoulder pads to kind of make it feel a little bit more strong and intense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was pretty simple. Again, Hayden, I find actors who have been doing this for a long time, they know what they want, they know what they look good in, what they feel good in. And so it was very simple with her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Going over to the core four, I love that they're the core four. Um, you're sort of bringing them from Woodsboro, which is California, to New York
Yeah.
City. How did the new location sort of inform the way that you dressed them for this film?
Well, I wanted to maintain the integrity of the last film, but I also wanted it to, I actually talked a lot about this with Mason because we both moved to New York when we were the age that the core four are playing. And we talked a lot about how, when you live wherever you live before you go to New York, you're like, oh yeah, this is cool, whatever. And then you get to New York and you're like, oh, I gotta up the ante a bit. So I kind of treated it as if each of the core four would have like gone shopping and been like, okay, I need to like kind of level up a bit. But I still wanted it to feel believable, but that it was the same character and the same person. So that's sort of how we treated it. Like Tara still wears the baby pink. Sam still has that sort of like utilitarian look. Like her bomber jacket is actually from an army surplus store and we recut it. Mindy has the graphic tees.
Mhm.
And Mason's still the like sort of team sports jock, but his jeans are fit a little different. He's got the 70s Convert. Like he's just there. Like there's a little bit of the details have changed a bit, but the blueprint is still there.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved Mindy's strong femme lead shirt. Did
Yeah.
you make that specifically
Yeah,
for?
I designed that
Yeah.
actually. I actually so when I approached Mindy, I was looking at a lot of just sort of like past or I was looking at sort of the queer history of New York, and also Mindy is so sarcastic, and I was looking also just like at a lot of like feminist graphic tees, and I kept coming across this one t-shirt that was strong female lead.
Mhm.
I was like, I feel like this is so not intersectional. And I don't know, I kind of rolled my eyes at it and I was like, I feel like Mindy would feel the same way. And so I was like, what's the Mindy um version of this? And so I was like, well, femme, because femme is an inclusive word. And then I looked at classic films that have queer undertones, like way from the past. And I think the femme font I picked is very similar to Rebecca, the
Nice.
movie Rebecca. And then also Portrait of Jason, that film.
Mhm.
So I kind of looked at classic movie posters, the fonts that they used, and then redesigned this t-shirt to sort of feel appropriate for Mindy. Where she would get this t-shirt, I have no idea. And then her Lavender Menace tee is actually a recreation of there was a movement in the 70s of a group of lesbian women who did not feel included in the feminist movement. Like they felt very excluded. And so they got together and did a sit-in. I forget the location of it. But they got together and they made these t-shirts, hand stenciled and hand dyed them lavender. And so what we did was we made a hand stencil, we hand dyed the t-shirts, as if Mindy maybe would have done it herself. But I really wanted to, you know, the Scream films are all about legacy. And I was like, New York to me is the epicenter of like queer legacy. Just because it's, I think, one of the places on earth where it really is a safe space in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Not everywhere in New York, but community wise. And so I felt like Mindy would probably, you know, for the first time really see herself in other people and community and whatnot. And so that was sort of how I approached her and her little hoodie that has like a bunch of patches on it. And then she also has a jacket that she wears for like a millisecond that it's kind of purple, like purple velvet after the frat party, and it has a little patch on it. And it says Storme on it, and she was a drag king who also was, and she was a lesbian who was the bouncer at, I think she was the bouncer at Stonewall, but she a lot of people say she was the one that actually incited the Stonewall riots. And it was just sort of a little nod because Mindy's also biracial and a relation to that sort of lesbian history of New York. I felt like it was also a way of us paying our respects to that community. And Mindy also, I think, is the first, I think she's the first final girl that comes from that community, if I'm not mistaken. If she's not, I think Mindy's, I mean, I'm biased, but I think she's very important. So in that regard. So I really wanted to include that part of New York history in her costumes.
That's awesome. I love that. I noticed the Lavender Menace shirt too. There's a bar here actually in Toronto called Lavender Menace.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've been meaning to go there. But yeah, I saw those touches, but there was even more thought than I even thought. So that's incredible. Speaking of legacy though, one of the coolest parts of this film, of course, is the lair with all of the artifacts from the past, including the top story jacket, the Bradley video shirt, Debbie Salt's suit, all this stuff. Was this all stuff you had to recreate, or was there anything that was like taken from literally the previous films?
No, it was all remade.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It was kind of terrifying to try and recreate it all. But I it's funny, I mean, I have a lot of, I didn't realize how many friends of mine were Scream fans until I started working on it. I knew like the fan base is extensive and large, but I have quite a few friends who have been like, wow, there were so many, and who are in costume are like, wow, you guys had so many of the original costumes. And I was like, yes, I tricked you. But no, we had to recreate pretty much all of them except for some of the ones from 5, which they still had the costumes from. So
yeah. That top story jacket, that was perfect.
It was like pretty bang on.
Yeah, I loved it. I have also seen a TikTok just yesterday. People are already like, you know, going crazy and making theories and stuff that says, and I don't remember this being featured by one of the killers, but you tell me, that if a person is wearing a blue plaid shirt, they are a suspect. Like they should be checked out because Billy wears a blue plaid shirt in the first one. I guess Jill wears one in Scream
Yeah.
4. Richie wears one in Scream 5. I don't know. What do you think of this theory?
I think it's pretty spot on. I don't know. Can I talk about spoilers yet? I don't know if I
I
can.
think that you're allowed because I was going to talk to you
Out.
earlier and they were like, it has to be after the movie's out. So I think yes.
Okay. So I will say that in the first scene, Bailey has a plaid tie, and that is intentional.
Okay. Okay.
So not a plaid shirt, but it was and the whole family has sort of a little Easter egg circle back to the fact that they are who they are. Like, Ethan wears a textured shirt in the same way that Billy had a textured shirt.
Okay.
And then Quinn has a family tree necklace and bracelet. To me, that, I mean, not a lot of people would actually see it and read into it, but it signifies the legacy of their family and that it's important to her.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So some truth to that theory. I love to hear that. And I'm sure other people will too, because people get so into this stuff. They get so into the details, which I'm sure is a lot of pressure for you. But speaking of details, I of course have to get into the mask. I know that you made sort of the new mask and
Yeah.
for this film, which is an old mask. It's a new mask to this universe, but it is an old mask. And I heard that you modeled it a bit off of, aged dolls, porcelain dolls that have gone
Yeah.
through the aging process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, where do I begin? Well, I was in the script, and then it came in a new script revision, or maybe it was the script that I received, because we only received the first 70 pages. So it may have been after I got the last pages of the script that I found out I had to do that. And I was like, great. I was like very terrified of taking this iconic mask that, there's been variations throughout the years, but it's always been white. I just started thinking about, things that have sort of terrified me, that have a face, that that have a face, that really have creeped me out, that are old. And I was like, porcelain dolls. And also they crack, and even I didn't just look at porcelain dolls, I also looked at plastic dolls that have the same sort of silicone texture as the Ghostface masks do, because when I read the revisions, I was like, well, those masks don't really crack. They sort of, because I also looked at 25-year-old versions of the mask that people had online and would post, and they basically just yellow. They don't really do anything too interesting. And, I'm sure there are some people who are naysayers of the mask because it's not, scientifically accurate of how it would crack, but it's also like, this is a Hollywood movie. We are like, it has to scare people. And so I started looking at materials that were similar to the Scream mask and how those would deteriorate witches' doll faces. So that's how I approached it. And then Radio Silence and I looked at those references together, and also samples of deteriorating paint chips and cracks and different techniques. And then what else? Yeah. Oh, and Val, my ager dyer, who was incredible. She and I started developing like where the cracks would be, where we'd want them on the face, and we sort of presented a bunch of options to the directors, and then they sort of honed in on like, I like this crack here, can you extend it here, can you add this here, can you and then we also worked with color. So one thing we did with it, because we could paint on top of it once we added sort of all the cracks, I added a lot of like on the, I guess we'll call it the cheek part here, there's highlights, and then in the kind of cracked, or in the deeper areas of the mask, we went darker. So you would have these sort of lowlights and highlights, so that once Brett hit it with light, it would feel much more sort of ominous.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
That's a lot of process just for this
oh,
one.
it was like really intense, but I was like, you know, if we're gonna do this, it has to be bang on and it has to be right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's gonna go down as a pretty iconic mask. I think it looked great. So
Thank you. I hope so. Yeah.
but fans are very particular. So I know the pressure's on. But speaking of masks, moving on to the Halloween costumes, I know that that's something that, you know, people saw the trailer, they start tracking who's in there, what
Yeah.
characters they recognize. What was the process in deciding what characters you wanted to put in there? Because there's a nice mix of, you know, the classics like a Pinhead, Freddy Krueger kind of thing, and then there's like Us is I saw like the characters from Us, you know, like how did you decide what mixture you wanted?
We sort of started with like, who are the classic horror characters that Radio Silence just wanted in the film? Like Jason and Freddy Krueger, and like the old school classic sort of franchise legacy guys. And then we also looked at Wes Craven's full history. There's lots on the subway of that, you know, honoring Wes. I know they did it in 5, but this is like, they're so dedicated to that. So we were like, this is a great opportunity um to really honor him. Even just like the Freddy Krueger costume, because, you know, he wore a version of that. And then we, you know, Scream, as much as it is about cinema and horror, it's also always touching on the zeitgeist. So we also wanted to have things on the subway that were like really relevant to today, movie wise, and also New York icons. Like we have some like really classic New York people on there, like Jean-Michel Basquiat. We have Andy Warhol, Fran Lebowitz, Bill Cunningham. Who else? Oh, I did Julia Fox because I felt like she's very much part of the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Oh, I just realized Stormy, who I was talking about earlier, not Stonewall. I think it was the Cubby Hole she was a bouncer at, but she was at the Stonewall riots.
Okay.
Sorry. It
No, it's okay.
all a blur, and I don't want to get that history incorrect.
No,
But
no. Obviously, there's a reference to a film that you worked on previously with Radio
yes.
Silence, Ready or
Yeah.
Not. I just wonder how you feel about seeing that costume recreated so lovingly. Like people have really latched onto that character and the particular like final girl look of that character. How does that feel for you as the designer of that look?
It was really cool. I felt a little weird. I had a bit of like imposter syndrome, like putting my own costume in the movie. You know what I mean? Like, but I know that it also means so much to people, that character. Like I still get tagged in cosplay versions of it years after it being released. So, and you know, Sam's in the movie. The reason I was doing the movie was that movie because I knew the guys from doing it. So it felt very special in a lot of ways to do it. And Tyler actually said to me, he was like, do you know any other costume designers who have created a costume version of their own work for a movie before? And I was like, not that I can think of. I feel like there must be, but it was a very surreal thing to see. The hardest part of it for me was like kind of making it look like Halloween costume and not recreating my work.
Yeah.
But that was like a challenge overall for the film. So yeah.
Yeah. it's a cute touch, and obviously it's just an iconic costume. Like I feel like now you're gonna create even more iconic costumes. Like people are gonna recreate, people are gonna that strong femme lead, like people are gonna want that shirt, like 100%. Like you could
I
sell.
hope so. I mean, I love that shirt. I mean, I had so much fun with Mindy's costumes, truly. And Jasmine's so like collaborative and into it and really puts a lot of care into everything she does. So
Yeah, yeah. Um, my last question for you was going to be, what is your favorite scary movie? Because I feel like I have to ask that question, but knowing that you're not a horror fan, I don't know if you have an answer.
well, okay, I would say I'm a horror fan now. I
Okay.
wasn't before. So I worked on I was a costume buyer on the series Hannibal, and
Hmm.
then I worked with Radio Silence, and those were the two projects that sort of made me realize it desensitized me, so I don't like don't run out of a room screaming now when I see a horror preview, because I understand that most things are a prosthetic and that kind of thing. That's a hard question. Um, I mean, not to be too on the nose, but the first Scream is like a brilliant classic that I've seen a million times now. But if we're not talking Wes Craven, I always feel so on the spot when anyone asks me about movies, like what is my favorite?
It's hard, man. I feel the same way. I feel like sometimes also my answer changes depending on the audience because like certain
Yeah,
people don't get or don't know, they don't know about that film, you know what I mean? So like I always say Halloween, the original Halloween is my favorite movie.
I love The Shining.
Yeah.
And I think also because the costumes are so good in it, the production design, I'd say The Shining.
Yeah. You got
But again,
the
it's like I didn't even understand, like I had seen Kubrick before I really understood and valued and respected horror, but I the appreciation I think changed once I sort of understood it more. Does that make sense? But um also the Grady twins are on the subway.
yeah, I clocked them immediately. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
they're
No, I
there.
was like immediate. I was like, we need the Grady twins on the subway.
They're some of the most iconic costumes of all time for sure.
Oh, for sure. Well, and that was the thing too that was so fun about doing this project overall is I felt like I sort of had the opportunity to honor a lot of my like costume idols. Like I think Milena Canonero did The Shining, who's one of my favorite costume designers. She also did Marie Antoinette. Like she's an icon. And so to sort of have the opportunity to A, do Halloween costumes because I love Halloween, and then B, look throughout history at the most iconic kind of horror costumes throughout time and even contemporary costumes, and then pay homage to like the people that have come before me and their work was something like really special.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Anything else you want to add about your time working on Scream? Any fun tidbits for the fans before we go?
Not that I can think of. It was just kind of the best time ever. Like I had such I had so much fun, and I love working with Radio Silence, and I loved meeting, everyone on the project, and I think it's a fun movie, and I hope everyone enjoys it.
Yeah, it's a blast. It's a blast. I hope, I assume seven's gonna happen. Maybe you'll be working on seven. Who knows?
I would love to.
Yeah.
It's funny, someone asked me when I was at the premiere, like where I'd like to see it go next. And I was like, well, if I were to do it selfishly, I
Hmm.
want it to be in Mexico. But I also think like Melissa's from there, so it could be like really cool. Like a
Yeah. You know what? We've
like,
left Woodsboro, so like, why
why
not?
not travel the world? But I'm
Yeah.
also like, if it's back in Woodsboro, where there is Scream, I will follow. So
Yeah, absolutely. Same here.
If they'll have me. That's the thing. I mean, don't assume anything, but
I think you've got
yeah.
it in. I think you might have it in there. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Avery.
Yeah.
This was awesome. Everybody, you can see Scream 6 now in theaters. See it again. Take all your friends. Have a great time. And yeah,